go.
Hello and back to the Not the Old Firm YouTube channel. My name is Ben Banks. Back to look ahead to Scotland's UEFA Nations League matches after all the elation, the excitement, the dire football. I think every emotion in the world was just about experienced on Thursday night when Scotland progressed to one step closer to the UEFA Euro 2020 tournament next summer, beating Israel on penalties 5-3 after a pretty dire 120 minutes. Good penalty shootout though, and we had reaction to that on the channel on Thursday night as Scotland progressed, and you can watch that now, as well as our interview with Lewis Spence, former Dundee, Dunfermline and Ross County man. But today it's looking ahead to Scotland's next fixtures. First of all, today as we record this, they have Slovakia before the Czech Republic are welcomed to Hampden on Wednesday night as the triple header comes to an end. We'll look at those two games now and we'll review two games right on the full-time whistle of the Czech Republic game. So looking at tonight's game, one of the talking points again has been COVID-19. I think pretty much everybody involved in these three games for Scotland, Slovakia and Czech Republic, have been affected by positive cases in their camps. And it brings into this debate, we've had other cases as well. Israel have had positive tests since Scotland's game. Under-19s boss Billy Stark got a positive test halfway through the Scotland under-19s game with England. It throws up this debate of whether should we just be canning international football at this stage, because it seems to be that whilst on the domestic scene you can contain the virus a bit more because you're in these wee bubbles. When you're travelling abroad and over borders and things like that, it's simply impossible.
Yeah, I will admit that I'm not a huge fan of international football to begin with. So, I mean, more often than not, if you ask me if I'd can internationals, I'd agree. But just now, there is absolutely no reason whatsoever for these games to be going ahead. I would maybe make a slight exception for the Euro 2020 playoffs. So I would possibly argue that those should have been played. However, they should have done those in a format similar to how they finished the Europa League and Champions League last season. Had the games all played in one kind of biosecure location, had all the teams in one area, done it that way. For stuff like Nations League games, why? What is the point? Why have we got, and admittedly the Scotland games are both at home, but I believe the Czech Republic were playing Cyprus away the other day. Or maybe they're playing Cyprus tonight. Then they're coming to Scotland. They've got Slovakia, who've been wherever they've been, who are now coming to Scotland for this game. There's just no. We really didn't need to be having footballers travelling, and in some cases travelling across the world to go and play World Cup qualifiers, Euro League, Nations League games. Christ, there's even international friendlies going on just now. Really?
Yeah, I think the thing is that in Wales, I think Steve Clarke, speaking ahead of the game, says he doesn't think international football should be scapegoated or words to that effect due to the effects of COVID-19. And he was asked directly about whether the game should be canned. I don't think it's any coincidence that this week in football, especially with you can only look at Scotland, I suppose, within Scottish football, but Scottish football, we have had flare-ups. Kilmarnock's the one that sort of stands out most recently, and you had Aberdeen and Celtic fiasco at the start of the season, but more or less, it's been fairly okay it was always inevitable that cases were going to flare up, but in terms of like teams playing other teams and things like that and giving it to each other. Now, I'm not suggesting that has happened yet, but it surely is inevitable that, we're being advised as civilians not to travel large distances again and things like that. You shouldn't go into other borders. I think in like the Central Belt, basically, if you live in the Central Belt, do not exit the Central Belt. If you live in Lanarkshire,
Well, just to give you an example, like the SWPL, so the Scottish Women's Professional Leagues, the second division had to rip up their entire opening week schedule. Now they're exempt and they are allowed to play. However, to try and minimise the risk to players and teams, They've ripped the schedule up and they've tried to keep games as local as possible for the opening weekend, which is like next weekend, October 17th, 18th. So rather than having, say, Glasgow City travelling to Edinburgh to go and play Spartans, they're trying to keep the games as local as possible. So can anybody possibly, and it's the same in youth football as well, I know the SYFA and I believe the SFA put out guidance that teams in the five affected health areas can't go outside to play a team from, say, Fife or from the Highlands and Islands. So why the hell have we got players travelling two-thirds of the way around the world to go and play international friendlies? It's beyond belief. I didn't get it. I just don't get it at all.
I know these players are being tested, and that when they set off for these international camps, regardless of wherever they are in the world, they're tested negative. I mean, that doesn't mean they can't get the virus on a plane or whenever they may be. And it's not so much when they get into the camps that's the problem. Like in the camps, I've seen the protocols work firsthand. I'm more than sure that they do work. It's the actual getting to them that's the problem. They can't bag them in cotton wool and put them in the mail and send them to these camps. There's not really a lot they can do, but because there's not a lot they could do, is that not an argument why? Because it is inevitably a risk.
Well, you just look at how many camps have had positive tests. I mean, off the top of my head, you've got all the players in the Scotland camp who've been, not exposed, but have been in some sort of contact with the players who've tested positive. You've got the other teams in the group who have got players in Scotland. You've got guys from the old firm who are away in international duty with their national squads who've had teammates pick it up or they've picked it up themselves. There was a load of kind of bother at the start of the season about fans gathering outside grounds and that potentially being what would cause the end of the season. International football's got more chance of doing it. See, rather than this idea of 20 fans hanging about outside the Tony Macaroni would be what leads to the plug being pulled. It's international games. It's players going away and then coming back, and clubs ending up having 5, 6, 7, 8 players having to self-isolate.
Yeah, I think in next month's games, for example, when they are like Euro 20 playoffs, I'm not just saying that because Scotland are involved in them, whether it was Israel or Scotland competing in them, because they are meaningful games with serious ramifications if they aren't played, in terms of major tournaments either being cancelled or not. I think Bay games, there's a good argument to be made for trying to get them to go ahead. Obviously, if circumstances mean they can't, then they need canned, but they should make an effort to try and get them played. But these UEFA Nations League games that, I mean, I don't even know if countries fully understand how they work. I mean, it's been really beneficial for Scotland, and because that's how they got to this playoff final against Serbia in the first place. But I think in the grand scheme of things, when it's just qualification matches, then they really should be looking at them. But in terms of the games, Slovakia, do you know much about them? They beat. Yeah, I'm looking at the Slovakia team just now, and I think there was maybe a point in time, maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, where the Slovakia team was very strong, but now it looks. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm a connoisseur in Slovakian football, but looking at a team line from theirs about 4 or 5 years ago, when they had the likes of Skirtle playing at the top of his game for Liverpool and things like that, they've just not got the bodies anymore. Like Marek Hamšík is probably still the one player you look at and you go, he's the danger man. I mean, he's been there forever, really, it feels like now. So it'll be interesting to see. I don't think they're as strong as they once were. Scotland obviously beat them quite famously recently in that 1-0 game at Hampden. So they have proven they can get by this side before. It's just a case of whether Clark's ready is going to rotate the squad as well. So whether that actually happens or not, you can probably expect to see 4 or 5, maybe less than that, to be fair, given the way Clark rotates his side. Just talking about you obviously should probably mention that there are new call-ups to this Scotland squad, all pretty much defensive options. Andy Considine, for me, is the one he really deserves that. He's been absolutely brilliant for Aberdeen now for a number of years, and he probably deserves a call-up way before this. So it's good to see him get his call-up. Paul McGinn's been really steady for Hibs. He's arguably been maybe at least second best right back in the Scottish Premiership this year. Definitely the best performing Scottish right back of the season. And as well as that, Ross McCrory, the under-21s captain, rewarded for his good Aberdeen form as well. So interesting to see how they do as well, whether they get call-ups. You'd like to think that at least in the Czech Republic game, which we'll speak about now, given that Czech Republic have already named a potential team that they could take on Scotland. And it's again another B team. So Scotland could end up facing another Czech Republic B team on Wednesday, should their virus problem get out of control again. And I mean, when you look at these games and the opportunities Scotland have been handed, it's a really good chance to sort of secure a playoff spot for World Cup. And I know that maybe goes against all the points we've just said about the scrap of these games and things like that. But if you just look at the games as a whole in isolation, then they are a decent opportunity. I mean, if that happens, then that's 8 unbeaten for Scotland. I mean, at what point do you start going? I know that a lot. I mean, I'd say more of those performances have actually been critiqued than they have been praised. So, at what point do you start actually giving Steve Clarke and the team a bit of praise? Because I mean, if they go 8 unbeaten, that's unheard of for Scotland, regardless. Right, that's fine. We'll leave it there then for this wee short preview of the upcoming games. We hope you have enjoyed, and hopefully it is another decent result in both games for Scotland. We'll have a look back at both of them on the full time whistle on Wednesday night, prior to the Scottish Premiership returning. But before that as well, there's more League Cup action to come on Tuesday night as well, with lots of action over the weekend. We were at plenty of games, I think, over the games that happened over Friday and Saturday. We were at 5, and we'll bring you all the interviews and reaction to that tomorrow, I think, on the channel as well. And we'll have look back on the other League Cup games as well that are to come on the Tuesday. It's all happening before the Scottish Premiership returns next week, as well as we'll have another exclusive interview on the channel later in the week. So keep an eye out for that. But until next time, take it easy.